Good evening, friends. I'm waiting for Mark to join us so we can go into some conversation about work he's been doing with anomalous health incidents. I keep forgetting to turn my notifications off. But in 1 hour, I will be helping Frank Figluzzi do a Q&A. So please join us at that time if you have questions for former Chief of Counterintelligence, former Assistant Director of the FBI, guy who has a lot of experience dealing with security in the United States and around the world. And yeah, I think it'll be a good time. I think it'd be a good chance to have some questions and answers. I'm just going to help field them. I'll be reading the text at the bottom, making sure people are answered. So, how am I doing today? I'm exhausted, actually, in a good way, though. I mean, it's got a lot of work going on and got a lot of things done this week. And now it's the weekend already. It's It feels like it was just the weekend. That's usually when I'm, kind of wiped out, is when I feel like we're kind of in one big conveyor belt of Groundhog Day. We have some activity in the sky in the east, but right here in Kiev, it's quiet. It's been quiet for the last day or so. And otherwise, just been editing. I'll leave this earpiece out. It's in my ear until, whoa, such a big difference. Till Mark pops in. Um, Finish the editing of the Richard O'Brien interview, which will air tomorrow night. Late for United States time, so that means I will go to bed, get some sleep, and at some point in time around, I guess, 10 o'clock East Coast time, hop on and bring you a really nice conversation I had. So, anyway, other than that, shifting tides in DC, from what I understand, with the Trump administration regarding Ukraine, and that they see Ukraine as a very strong country fighting back. This is causing at least a little bit of shift in the way it's discussed. That's good. We'll see how that turns out. How is my nutrition? I haven't been to Mama's in a few weeks. I'll be going over there tomorrow. Uh, just to avoid fast food and um, yeah, need more vegetables, but also it's changing seasons right now. Now's the time where vegetable prices are good. A lot of prices, by the way, speaking of, a lot of prices for food are really, really difficult. I think of the Ukrainian economy from ground level, meaning what does it cost, not me, but what does it cost a Ukrainian compared to either income or pensions? And, what is the cost of food? Because, when I first got here, it felt like a lot of items you could get for like ridiculously low price of healthy food. And in time, it's been really catching up. And the amount of food that a Ukrainian can walk away with from the grocery store is lower and lower and lower. And there are some items that are name level, brand name level. In America, I wouldn't pay for them. So I feel for people here who need to feed families, feed more than themselves. I'm pretty good at getting by with very economic plans. I tend to eat basically like chicken and vegetables, or a small amount of meat and vegetables. Nothing really fancy. Pretty easy to take care of. And just me, I tend to buy as I go along. Some items, they just don't wait. If it's more than one person, you can get bulk, but it's just me. Therefore, there's no point in trying to buy in bulk. Also, shifting tastes. So, like, I mean, whereas in America years ago, I would purchase across a range of items, so that if you open up my cupboard, I had, you know, 2 or 3 kinds of pasta to work with, or grades of rice, or tea. Like, now I don't bother with that. I keep it ridiculously simple. We're in a war. And being in a war, that cabinet is mostly lucky to have water, bags of tea, mainly for guests. Also, while we wait for Mark, I can tell you that my grocery shopping where I'm at locally is different than at my old location entirely because of selection. So whereas at my old location, I would get the impulse for something at their fresh cook area, or some vegetables of salo or bakery. It's like it was a much wider range. Here, it's at least in the places that are, the go-to, corner places. And I don't mean just like a corner shop, but corner grocery. They don't really have that. So it's pretty good for some choices. Not great for others, because with the lack of the diversity, you just go with choices that are at least healthiest. I also avoid breads as much as possible. A lot of items that are just made that way, so you can't. But at least overt, straight, and it's kind of hard here in the country that's like queen of all bread. So anyway, yeah, Slava Ukraini Heroim Slava. I see our friends are joining in. Let me get a chat window open. Just kind of trying to keep an eye on Mark's listings. Very busy attorney. How's everything else going for the rest of you guys? As I told you, in about 1 hour, I'll be going on, joining in with Frank Figluzzi. You can get his questions. Okay, yeah, you can get some good questions answered with Frank, and there's a lot happening in the news. I think it's a blessing that we can do such a thing. Also, don't forget to subscribe to these various experts' accounts if you can. If you are not subscribed to my account and the work I'm doing, I'm your independent journalist here in Kyiv. Definitely supported by the viewers and readers directly. That's my preference. It's difficult. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's good that it's happening. It's also it takes a lot of it to come together to be enough. But it's always a blessing, and it's the right way to go. We have more and more people who are waiting to get on board with how to get this platform to work for them. It's actually a bit of a struggle across the board for independent journalists. When they sign on to an agency, they have one set of issues. To an agency. There we go. Repeat of sound. Okay. I was trying to get your comments in play here. There we go. Alrighty. Now I can see your comments when you say I see them on the phone only. So again, Mark Zaid, had him on as a guest a few months ago. I've known Mark's work for a long time, and we had some good conversations recently that really are about how the government is stripping clearance of national security lawyers who we need to have clearance. They are uniquely qualified to be able to help clients through whistleblower statutes. So such information that they would have is not out in the public sphere. as was covered in our previous interviews and an extensive article I wrote about, Mark, by not taking care of these measures properly, you have people who worked in either government agencies and the military or contractors, and the odds are you increase the chances those people could go to work for either a hostile country, foreign intelligence, etc., or corporate, options that essentially just as many damages could be had from those breaches. And by creating the proper conduit and securing that conduit, which has taken years to perfect, lawyers like Mark Zaid make sure that that process is secure. I think it's really good to appreciate that most of these individuals are also very apolitical. They may have opinions. If there's anything I've gained from watching what their opinions are based in, destruction of rule of law is the thing that will mostly get their ire. Other things, I think, if there's one thing I respect in the national security realm, especially for the legal eagles, is that they don't really worry about that. They don't worry about whether you're losing your Second Amendment, because they know you won't. They're not concerned with, range of First Amendment violations to the integrity. I mean, not that they're not concerned. They'll fight them, but they tend to demonstrate a fairly straightforward, impartial view, in my experience. So I gravitate to different blogs and different writers and different practitioners for their voices. Some of them used to be extremely apolitical and have increasingly become very political in the modern age, including for and against Trump. It's disappointing when, for instance, if it's someone like Jonathan Turley, who was at times thought of at least maybe as a fairly uptight lawyer, but whose assessments were to be trusted. And over time, you can see repeatedly, he's, in my opinion, demonstrated that he's lost his damn marbles, gone too far. So anyway, so we're gonna have a conversation here in a bit with Mark. We'll see how things are going. He's also been very, very busy, so we were gonna do something yesterday, but I tell him we're not in a rush. This isn't nearly as important as trying to represent those Gen 6 clients he has, intelligence clients he has. And as we get close to the weekend, you guys are important. I know that one of the things that's really fun is to tune in and see him and Brian Karam in here having good conversations. There he is, bro, man. Let me see. This little camera. How you doing, man? I'm missing your audio. Can you guys hear? Let's see here. Okay, let's see. I have I have no audio. At the same time, I need to move my camera up just to hear. There we go. Yeah, we'll make it work. Yeah, it happens. Also, I've been messing around with the studio a little bit, so as you see, the flags are put away. They're actually secure in the other room, the other studio room. They'll be back. But audio is important to conversation. We have to be able to hear each other. especially when it comes to legalese. It goes a long way. Speaking of, um, I have been working on trying to master a few of the technical items to get what we want out of this silly device. And it's tricky. Sean and I were very aggravated with how the let's see here, hold on. There we go. We better?
Any
I
sound?
hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, man.
I don't understand any technology. If anybody could explain to me why the margins on my Word documents keep changing from frickin' document to frickin' document, I will be forever in debt. So we're
Well,
working now.
I always say the first fan in my zombie apocalypse buffer zone are tech bros. It's the easiest way to save a lot of lives.
I would like to just go back to the way it was in late 80s, early 90s, pre-internet.
A Selectric 2? Selectric 2s were pretty good.
I was fine with my old Mac, like the first generation Mac, or my Atari 800.
So, you got a lot of things that you cover, and I thank you for your time as always. I did kind of brief our viewers where we've been, just in case they hadn't had our previous conversation. So AHI is one of the big ones, but the Jan 6 cases have been fresh in the news with the slush fund and other items. So would you like to give us a view of what Mark's been doing for a while? What's on the desk, brother?
What's been going on? It's interesting. I've been telling folks June has been a really busy work month for good and bad reasons. The bad reasons is there's still chaos in the federal government. There's still politicization and actions that we need to take to hold the administration accountable because they do things that no one has ever done before. They fire employees for no reason. They impose loyalty tests that have never existed in any of the agencies before. So that has not changed. Maybe it's slowed down at times, right? No more Doge, things like that. But that is still there, right? There's still things going on with the Kennedy Center. We represent one of the whistleblowers who was a senior person at the Kennedy Center. So all sorts of things going on. The reflecting pool, right? There's always something that is self-inflicted, didn't need to be there.
Right.
But a year
it seems like that's the mission.
Sometimes I don't want to give them too credit that they have that this is actually a concerted plan. That the chaos of it, maybe who knows? I've never heard that that's actually been the plan. They just react and they, chaos. That's how it is. But a year and a half in the administration, things to some extent have actually settled down at many of the agencies so that we're getting back to business as usual. So they are now disciplining people whom perhaps deserve to be disciplined, or at least it's a normal case. It is a normal security clearance case. It is a normal disciplinary action case. It's what we see in every administration, in every federal government. And so the chaos before was preventing that, especially because they had fired so many people. Now they're hiring people again. So we're getting a lot of normal business. And I like that. I'm glad. I wish things were just normal. Every administration has issues. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. We are always holding people accountable. There's always someone at a senior level who's going to do something unethical. There's always someone at a senior level who's going to get prosecuted or disgraced and stepped down. It's off the charts in a second Trump administration, but it's always normal in every administration, right? Nobody thinks it's daisies and roses, pre or outside of Trump. It's just exacerbated.
What can you explain to us what the ODNI post the other day did related to whistleblower case I know that was active that Tulsi tried to throw the gears at. I wrote about the biolabs because that's an area I get to talk about here in Ukraine, but I know that part of her antics the other day included trying to affect a whistleblower case.
Right. So back in 2023 and then revised in January of 2025 before Trump took office as AHI, anomalous health incidents, are are not political. We do not make them political.
Right.
They're political with a small p. It's CIA more than anything else that is the problem, and they are the problem in every administration. I can trace this issue back to literally the 50s and 60s. It's not a straight line. It's a technological evolution, and which I'm happy to give more on
Absolutely.
to explain what I mean by that. But so there was an intelligence community assessment of which the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, coordinates. So what does that mean? It means what it sounds like, right? It's all of the intelligence community, all of the agencies who weigh in, and a product is issued. And this ICA, as we call it, concluded with different variations of confidence, which is how the intel agencies talk about it. I have a high level, I have a moderate level, I have a low level, and there are I'd have to look it up to explain that, frankly. But
Mhm.
you can Google that and find out what does that mean, kind of like from a statistical standpoint.
Also, how often they issue one or the other with certainty.
Yeah, and in this AHI aspect, there are agencies that have totally different opinions from one to the next. And those could be pretty significant distinctions between, I'm gonna make this up, but just to give a kind of
Sure.
understanding, from a number standpoint, like a high degree of confidence could be, let's say, well, you know what? I'll put it in legal terms to give an explanation. When we say beyond reasonable doubt for criminal convictions, that's
Right.
not you cannot have any doubt. It's basically 90 to 95%.
Hmm.
If you can get to that point, that's enough to convict someone and send them to jail. If
Mm.
you say, oh, I just remembered, I'm blanking on just what my middle one is. Clear and convincing evidence is
Hmm.
another legal standard.
Hmm.
If you can demonstrate clear and convincing evidence, you can reach the following conclusion. That's usually put at about a 75%
Right.
assurance rate. And then more likely than not, which is generally what I have to deal with the US government about, uh, you know, if it's a national security decision, it's more likely than not to defer to the US government. And that's literally, 50.01%.
Right. Right.
It's a
Right.
coin toss, right?
Right.
The
Right.
doubt goes, the deference goes to the government. So that's not an exact depiction of what these certainty standards are in for the confidence level, but it's that kind of level of distinction, right? More likely than not to beyond a reasonable doubt, that's literally almost 50%. That's, almost double the type of
Right.
confidence that one has. Um, and so what this ICA said was that they the intelligence community as a whole, while they believe that AHI victims are legitimate, that they are
Hmm.
truly suffering, in
Hmm.
fact, they're compensating them to the tune of $150,000 for some certain federal employees and lots of health care. They do not believe that a foreign actor is intentionally targeting them. Now that is what we believe.
Meaning not GRU Unit 29155.
Right. And it's like, okay, if you don't believe a foreign agent or power is targeting and causing AHI, yet you believe it to be real, I'm sorry, what the hell do you think it is? Really? I mean, because they've already ruled out environmental factors.
Cantaloupes.
Yeah. Right. They've already ruled out psychosomatic because they believe this to be real. I mean, they have medical tests.
And we had this discussion previously. How many locations are we seeing this at?
I would say I know of at least probably 8 to a dozen different locations around the world and multiple locations inside the United States. I can think of at least 3 in the US, in the sense of Northern Virginia, more than one location in Northern Virginia, particularly at CIA facilities that are classified. DC itself on the White House grounds, and in the Key West, Florida region, which was the 60 Minutes episode I was on back in 2024 with an FBI agent who was targeted in Key West, Florida. I know of others inside the U.S. suspected, I would say. And as far as, around the world, the ones that I know that have been revealed so far, certainly, obviously, Moscow, Russia, Tbilisi, Georgia, Vienna, Austria, London, England, Bogota, Colombia, Hanoi, Vietnam. I know I'm in places, some in Africa, some in the Caribbean. These haven't necessarily been identified specific countries. I know what they are because they were intel cases that I worked on. So, I mean, and there are a whole host of numbers. I mean, we are talking about, and look, and it varies. There have been hundreds and hundreds of U.S. federal government cases. Not all of them are going to be AHI. There are dozens and obviously Havana, Cuba. There are dozens and dozens of.
We love our viewers. They bring us back the obvious.
Yeah, there are dozens and dozens of identified and recognized. Guangzhou, China is another one. Recognized AHI cases, right? So how do I determine who I take on as a client? You've got to be a federal employee or a family member, and you must have received what we call a secretarial designation or the equivalent, which is a recognition by the U.S. government that you either were or may have been the victim of an AHI, and we, the U.S. government, are providing you with medical care for medical care, treatment, etc., diagnoses for that. And preferably, it would make it a lot easier if you have a diagnosis of a TBI, i.e. a traumatic brain injury, which many of them do. If you fall outside of those categories, I generally will not represent the individuals because it's too difficult to prove that anyone else is a victim. I also inquire about what type of work were you involved with? And for the most part, most of the people, the common denominator is almost always, I worked on Russia issues. Almost and not everybody, but almost for the most part, that was the key thing. And I don't know if if only Russia is the we do suspect clearly as the primary culprit.
Well, the technology has expanded beyond Russia's capability. Clearly, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It could be other countries that have been involved that are using the technology. We use the technology. I mean, we invented the technology. The Israelis use a variation of the technology as a sonic weapon. Our law enforcement sometimes use it for crowd dispersement. The Israelis have. This all on video. I mean, the technology, the biggest component of the technology for AHIs in the context that we look at it was, could it be sized down to something manageable and hideable? I think that's a word, right? Hideable?
Sure.
So that they wouldn't get concealable. I like that better, right? Because the naysayers years ago would say, oh, there's no way. The only way this could be done, the power source would have to be like the size of a U-Haul truck, and you can't hide that. And what we've learned in the last couple of years, publicly, because I'm only talking about stuff that is publicly known, because most of the evidence on AHI is classified. remains classified. I've had lawful access to a good deal of it, not all of it by any shape or sense. And we've learned that, yeah, the devices have become, like backpack size, small size, that can be moved and hidden. And it could have led to this. So circling back around, what the ICA said, no foreign involvement. And we've been working to challenge that for the last 2 years, two ways predominantly. One, and you had, as you said, and a whole bunch of your folks know, you had Brian Karam on as a guest. Brian is a client of mine, has been for a while, and we do a lot of FOIA litigation. So Brian and the James Madison Project, which I run, has a FOIA lawsuit for the last year, 15 months for the classified version of the ICA. You can find it online, the unclassified version, obviously. And we are suing for the classified version, obviously to declassify it. In the meantime, that case is still ongoing. In fact, I'm trying to think what sometime in July, I think, is our next stage in the case where the government has to reveal what's going on and what they're going to do. In any event, the other aspect was to put pressure on internally, lobby and advocate with especially the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Congressman Crawford and his staff, to have the DNI, as Tulsi Gabbard did in her waning days, to rescind it completely on the basis that the intelligence analysis was flawed, which is what she said, acknowledged, and did. Now the question is, so what? What does it do? What does that do now that ICA is no longer? Does it mean the CIA is changing its tune? It does not. So we need a new ICA. We need a legitimate ICA, and we need more transparency, which we've said multiple times on your podcast and elsewhere. More transparency about this issue. What the hell are you hiding and why?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's so frustrating about this particular administration is that, as you know, the history of any of these administrations hiding things is not new. That part is not new. But hiding them in the benefit of the adversaries is a relatively, to my memory at least, a new way of doing business. And everything from the biolab statement the other day, which, yes, biolabs exist, but the way she spun it, the way she's trying to make it sound one way when she knows it's not that. She's already been briefed that it's not that. And then here, they sort of throw they throw sand in the machine, right? They fog the audience, and for what aim? Like I said right before you came on, we need lawyers like you to protect whistleblowers who have need to share something they're concerned with without taking that outside the bubble, right? And having you in that mix protects all of us. And it seems like this administration is destroying all of those conventions that have been put together over the years to protect our interests, especially in the intelligence wing.
Well, the executive branch is certainly trying to destroy the ability of whistleblowers to lawfully blow the whistle, which frankly then just creates an opportunity for them to unlawfully blow the whistle, which we don't want. I don't want Ed Snowden's. I don't want 20-something-year-olds making a decision as to what should or should not be classified. I want decision makers who have the expertise to make that decision. Now, maybe you get to that point at the end of the day after you fail, and you make an informed decision. But I want whistleblowers who have the knowledge of an Ed Snowden to come to me, and then we'll take them through the process for free, for pro bono. We don't charge whistleblowers like that. We try and protect them so that they can continue to do their work, for the reasons why they went into public service or contracting, which is still a form of public service, because they're contracting and working for the U.S. government. There's the reason why they did that in the first place. But otherwise, in fact, this is why Snowden said he just leaked all this classified information to the media because he didn't think it would work if he tried it the lawful way. Well, you never tried, so you never found out if it
Right,
worked. And
exactly.
first of all, I would debate. I'm not sure what he did changed much of anything. Certainly not for the better. And he's still hiding out in Russia right now.
The so-called revelations in there. I've won this argument with everyone who brings it up. I said, "Oh yeah, that was in Washington Post in 2007. What's the other one?" And they go down the list and go, "Yeah, but that was argued out in the Ninth Circuit Court in 2006." Well, what was the other one? And they go down the whole list and go, "Right, but I was covering that before you ever knew the name Edward Snowden. So how is it possible we learned it from him?"
But yeah, I remember going on. We had rumors about all of this and what was happening. I remember going on with Keith Olbermann talking about some aspects of it in MSNBC in like 2007. Uh,
Right, right,
but what Snowden did, and actually, as a quick aside, if he had solely and singularly just disclosed the FISA court order, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court order, one page, that Verizon Business was being required every 90 days to turn over metadata, that alone would have given, as it did, legal standing to the plaintiffs suing the U.S. government about the
right,
constitutionality of the domestic program. That was the only thing that was needed to get the debate out there, which ended
right,
up being all in Congress and modifications made, which frankly, it resulted in approval by the Congress of the very
right.
thing that Ed Snowden doesn't like. So congratulations on that, I
And
suppose.
what about what's happening this last week with FISA? What's your read being up close?
Yeah, well, right. So we're the 702, this whole aspect, it's the same provision has now expired and there's now so the government is no longer allowed to use it. And it's part of this big debate over Jay Clayton being placed into, Bill Pulte taking over as the DNI is acting and now waiting on Jay Clayton, the former U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, to become the actual confirmed DNI. And I'm sure they'll put it into some package because there's no way they're giving up 702 or Section 215, which is another similar aspect of it. And
Mhm.
we need them. Now, we
Right.
need we
The
need them with
overall alignment in
oversight.
Congress is that they will do it, right? They're using it as leverage
Yeah,
for other.
it's leverage. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It will happen. And the American public should want it to happen with proper safeguards, guardrails,
Right.
oversight. And what I want to swing back to say is, as
Sure.
bad as this administration, the executive branch is, I will say that, and we can criticize Congress, deservedly so, significantly because they have ceded so much authority to the executive
Yeah.
branch. But at least on the AHI issue, they have
Mhm.
not. You know,
Okay.
and this is Republican. In fact, Republicans more so than Democrats have been
Mhm.
gung ho to hold the administration, whether it was the Biden administration or the Trump administration, hold their feet to the fire about these issues. So we
Good.
applaud the Republicans especially on the House Select Committee.
That's the ones I want back. I want the ones that are focused on national security pretty well and appropriately and properly. But one area they will never be right on for some compromised reason is January 6th. What is our update with our officers in the cases that you've been working on? Because I know you one is Sicknick family, and then also I know that Harry Dunn and Danny Hodges had their case related to the slush fund. I guess it's being called that. What's up in that section?
So on anything relating to January 6th, right, there's still a number of things going on. So
Hmm.
the court case for Officer Brian Sicknick's estate is part of a larger effort. It's the only active litigation directly from January 6th that
Hmm.
is on damages. And so we're combined with some other police officers, Capitol Police, as well as some members of Congress whose lives were placed at risk that day for obvious reasons. That is heavy in litigation and is now up on appeal to the D.C. Circuit, with some aspects of it still at the district court. Donald Trump is there as an individual defendant. The
Right.
government is in it as well. There are some number of other individuals, I think still the Proud Boys and or the Oath Keepers. We did not sue them. For the
Mhm.
Sicknick estate, we sued Trump and two individuals, convicted individuals, who had physically harmed Brian Sicknick. One was still in jail when he was pardoned. The other had served like 6 months and was already out. Uh, but we're consolidated with all of these other cases. So it's a lot of lawyers. It's a lot of lawyers. So that's still going.
Amen.
Um, Harry Dunn had litigation involving, as well as I think Aquilino Ganell did too, about the plaque in the Capitol.
Right. Location.
Think that is finished because the plaque went up. I wasn't the lawyer on it. And then
Right.
Harry and I believe Mike Hodges, a Metropolitan police officer, I believe both of them sued about the slush fund. Now, there were
Right.
multiple cases filed about the slush fund. The one that I believe has had the greatest impact is in the Eastern District of Virginia. I'm blanking, I'm sorry, on who the plaintiffs are. I just know it's not Harry Dunn or other clients of mine. And that was before Judge Brinkema. And she has just the other day, in fact, ruled again to make sure that the slush fund does not become a reality, because the Justice Department kept equivocating in all of its statements of,
Yeah.
well, does it exist? Does it not exist? Maybe we'll stop it. We're not doing anything at the moment, but we might do it later. And she's like, no, you're not. Done. So I don't know if they've decided anytime when the federal judge rules, if it ends the case, and I don't think this
Mhm.
ended the case, the government or the other party has 60 days to appeal. They can
Okay.
always seek a stay. They can also ask for what's called an interlocutory appeal, which is if the case isn't over, but you have an important part of the case that really could be decisive, you can ask for permission to appeal. So I don't know if I don't believe the Justice Department has said what it's going to do yet.
Right.
But those are all still active questions that are certainly out there. The other aspect that's still ongoing that nobody hears about is there is a subcommittee of the House that is reinvestigating January 6th from
Good.
the you know, opposite side of
Ah.
what the select committee
Oh.
January 6th was in the first time.
Trying to find the Antifa source, huh?
Yeah. And so it's what else was missed? And
Oh
and
my
I
God.
have represented people before it already. I mean, and I'm not quite sure what the purpose of it is ultimately.
Waste time.
And given we'll see what happens in November, obviously, with the midterms, because if the Democrats win, that subcommittee is, no longer.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not a lawyer like smart guys like you, but I always try to tell people that you have to first disposit the first assertion before you throw the second assertion on, because the first one didn't just magically disappear because you made up a new one. So the first case still exists. You understand that, right? Like in the case of Gen 6, I literally have the evidence right here on my hard drives here. All those cameras around the Capitol, months of all those guys planning to attack. That's what my job was, and I brought it with me to Ukraine. It was so novel. Um, final question for tonight, and I love that you come back, Mark. First off, as you know, I got a huge respect for you and for the role you fulfill to our country. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Chris.
This case over the wrestling arena in front of the White House. Judge Mehta threw it out basically on procedural grounds. Essentially, can't prove you have standing enough would be the way I would have read it as a non-lawyer. You didn't file it soon enough. But he didn't really rule on the merits, and judges do this a lot. And because I always think about what our viewers need to walk away with. I started thinking like, well, how would I ask lawyers, how do you get enough standing, or who is it that would have enough standing to stop such obscenities? Meaning we know these things are violations against codes. We can all even have the code pointed out. The judge might even say, yes, that's the great code, but you're not the one who can take it. And it still gets dismissed. So all these things start becoming a big aggravation. It makes it feel like the system doesn't work. When it does work, it's not being applied correctly. So what would you say to all of us stupid people who don't know how this stuff works? How to learn ways we can have standing in these cases, or we can call the right person who magically might have such things.
Yeah, and it's certainly nothing about being stupid about it, because these are issues that we as lawyers struggle with all the time and trying to figure out, can we bring this case? Does this plaintiff have proper standing? Or, hey, we want to bring a case to challenge whatever such conduct might be. Who can we get as a proper plaintiff?
Right.
And one of the things that has happened over the years is a notion called taxpayer status as standing has really been pushed to the side, that it doesn't exist. The argument was, whenever taxpayer money was being used, which would be pretty much anytime something that the government does, right? Right. Even though they keep telling us the ballroom is being paid for by private funds, then we keep seeing another article or investigation where it's actually taxpayer funds. So the argument would be, well, if it's our funds from my taxes, then I should be able to sue about it. But the courts have pretty much held now that that's too tenuous. It's too thin, a standing to have. Same thing with members of Congress. They used to try that too, that just because you're a member of Congress and you may vote on something, that's not enough to give you standing. So, like,
Right.
what would be an obvious thing from a standing standpoint? Oh, I want to sue someone because they hit my car. I suffered damage, so I'm going to sue. Now, what starts to kind of expand that? Maybe it was a horrific car accident. I mean, and people died, and it was really, I'm traumatized. I was standing on the corner and I saw it happen, and now I'm forever, PTSD because of what I
Right.
saw happen, and I sue the person who caused the accident. There could be standing there with emotional distress and other claims depending on the state and the jurisdiction. But that's like kind of just an explanation of what does it
Yeah.
mean. So for the fight on the White House lawn, you identified correctly the two things that Judge Mehta, who's our judge in the Brian Sicknick, J Sicknick,
Right.
actually,
Right. I know
very
the
fair.
judge's record pretty well.
Yeah, very fair judge. Um, and believe me, I win, I lose all the time. Anytime you sue the government, most of the time we lose. Doesn't matter. It's just the
Right.
way it is. But we keep doing it to hold everyone accountable. So the two things were, well, as I recall, the two people who sued are just like Virginia taxpayers. All right, that's not enough. How do you suffer,
Mhm.
an injury as far as that? I mean, I was sickened by it. I'm like, really? This is what we're paying for on the white? I mean, to me, and it has nothing to do with whether you like mixed martial arts and stuff like that, but it
I
doesn't,
actually happened like mixed
yeah,
martial arts, and I was grossed out by it.
it doesn't belong on the White House lawn.
Right.
Put it at Capital One Arena, or
Right.
Madison Square Garden or wherever. Or bring it to Mar-a-Lago, dude. If you own the place, go ahead. That's fine. I don't care.
Or
Uh,
change the regulations by which we do things so we don't have this argument.
and then the other thing was, and this one is even less forgivable, frankly. And I know who the lawyers are who brought the case, but I mean, we knew this was going to happen for months. So
Mhm.
why you wait until the last minute? Now, I mean, maybe they didn't identify someone who was willing to step up as a plaintiff. I don't know. I don't know why they waited, But
Mhm.
for something of that magnitude, when they have spent so much money to set it up and you know in advance it's happening, it's not fair to even the government or the court to
Right.
bring the case in at the last minute, days before, whatever it was, or even a week before, to have legal briefing and fight. It's just not the right way to do it. So, like, who could have had standing for something like that? Um, it's a tough one. We were thinking
Right.
about it. It's
Yeah.
it's a it's a tough one to figure out.
Yeah, my
Maybe.
only thing in terms of action planning for activists who think in terms they get all the right ideas in order, and then, I hear about it myself, and again, not being a lawyer, but at least I grew up with more than enough law around, I can hear it. When I tell them you're not gonna be able to get anywhere with that particular path, that doesn't work anymore. Or maybe there's a path that works better than others, so,
Let's
yeah,
say, who could have had interesting standing
sure.
is if one of the fighters was going to participate and
Mm.
he or she, I suppose it could have been, I don't know if it was all he's, they, meaning just generically, because I have no idea, that person was going to was prevented from joining because they're not a Trump supporter, and
Ah,
they were going to say something much in this way that one guy said, the ridiculous comment that thankfully Dana White criticized about Michelle Obama. It's like, dude, that doesn't belong there at all. And but if it had been that other way, and from a First Amendment standpoint, they were going to be blocked
right.
from making a statement, that person would have had legal standing to shut it down or at least allow them to be part of it. That
Yeah,
would, but I mean, I don't know if that
the
was
private
real.
profiting off of it was my primary concern. Real quick, and I think I can answer this, but we're gonna do this final question from our Greek brother here.
Yep, I saw that. I was going to say
Otherwise
I want
known
to answer that.
otherwise known as my Greek mother. If John Kiriakou, and I know John, exposed CIA waterboarding and still isn't considered a whistleblower, then what does whistleblower actually mean? So my first answer, and tell me if I'm wrong, is
Go ahead.
exposing the name of Deuce Martinez is not whistleblower. He exposed the name of a CIA agent to a journalist, a reporter. He doesn't tell that John. If you ever see this, John Kiriakou, I love you, bro. You know I stood up for you when you were in Lower. But that's not what you went to jail for. You went to jail for revealing CIA agent. There is no documentation of whistleblowing related to waterboarding itself. Now he publicly did come out with it, yes, but that's not what he was charged for.
No, and to make sure everybody knows, I used to represent John Kiriakou when he first appeared in the aftermath of his ABC interview about waterboarding.
With Brian Ross. Yeah.
And I remember watching it live. I didn't know who he was. And I remember frankly thinking that this was a CIA operation, that this was deliberate. I didn't think it was negative about the CIA. I mean, we knew about aspects of it. I thought it was actually more defensive of the CIA. And I soon
Mhm.
came to learn that that was not the case. The CIA was frickin' furious at him. And there
Right.
was a criminal investigation. And initially I was his lawyer. And then Plato Kacharis took over for me. Uh, that wasn't about whistleblowing. He didn't I do not believe he revealed anything that was classified. That's why he never got prosecuted for it. Now, others will disagree with that in the inside of the agency. Now, in his criminal case, I represented one of the journalists to whom he provided information,
Mhm.
and I dealt with both the government lawyers and John Kiriakou's lawyers at the time. And we weren't in opposition. I was protecting my client's journalistic rights,
Mhm.
that he had sources and he wasn't going to necessarily reveal. So I read exactly what the back and forth was between John and the different journalists because it
Right.
was part of the discovery. And he ended up pleading guilty to one count of violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act. The only person ever, I still think, as I
Yeah.
recall, who pled guilty to that. I testified about that statute back in 2006 or 7. I can't remember which it was, with
Right.
Victoria Tunzing, who you may know of.
Not a
Uh,
fan, but yes.
And she and I were the experts on the panel. It was the hearing where Valerie Plame made her first public appearance.
My other friend, yeah.
She was on the first panel, then there was a government panel, then Victoria and I were the experts. I think I was the Democrat witness, she was the Republican witness, but it had nothing to do with politics. I agreed with everything Victoria said. As far as I know, she agreed with what I said. Back at the time, we were very friendly with one another, but that's not now. John Kiriakou and he is not an ally of mine. He has attacked me multiple times. He can explain why that is, and he'll no doubt defame me in the process. But knock yourself out, dude. I do say, I will just say, I have always said publicly that I thought he was completely mistreated by the government with respect to that prosecution. What he told, the information basically, reporters were like, I would like to do a story on this topic. Who would you recommend I talk to, John? And John wrote back, here's the phone number of this person. Don't tell him I gave it to you. That is called Washington, D.C.
Right.
Everybody
and again, I've gotten along with him well. My difference is over. I don't like when people say mistruths or lies about Ukraine, etc. So once you go down a particular pipeline, I'm just going to call that your credibility. But
like I used to go on RT television when it first came to the United States, and there were legitimate journalists that worked there, and it was a great program to go on because they challenged the U.S. government, and we could say whatever we want. But within a year, it became very clear that the Russian government controlled RT. Almost all of the journalists that were there, who had come from ABC, CNN, CBS, Fox, they all quit. And if you're involved, I refuse. I will not go on RT any longer because it is a state-run mouth of Putin's government. And that's where John chooses to appear.
Exactly. Well, brother man, big love to you. We will need you often. And please let us know any way we can help you, and to our friends and subscribers here. Make sure you don't miss posts from Mark, because you're going to learn some stuff. And again, Mark, thanks for coming by and keeping us briefed on what is going on in crazy chaos days in DC.
Anytime, Chris. You stay safe.
See you soon. Do my best.
Yes,
I live in a world that we're going to get through.
All right. Take care, my friend.
By the way, Mark, this weekend I will finally have the only people a little cooler than you and I. Richard O'Brien, creator of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, is my featured interview this weekend. So I hope you like doing the time work.
That is phenomenal. I keep trying to find where in the DC area they are playing a midnight show so I can bring my now adult kids to see it, because they don't know it any longer.
He commissioned me to do he literally in the interview he commissioned me to produce a musical in war. And I said, okay. I didn't hesitate. Yeah. So I literally, for the last few days, have been calling everyone. Do you know how to make a musical?
Yeah, it was probably
anyone who makes it?
It was probably my first introduction to Meatloaf. I loved his role in that, and I became such a big fan of Meatloaf. And of course, Bat Out of Hell album was 2 years later, as I recall. I think 77. And I mean, that movie is still such a classic. But it's fun to watch it on the screen, on the television. But it is much better to go see it live in a movie theater, because so many people still dress up, and they'll throw toilet paper and they'll throw rice at the wedding scene. And
his son just put out Strange Journey, which is a documentary about it. So it's a 2-part feature tomorrow night around this time. And I'll see everyone soon. Mark, take care of yourself. See you soon.
Take care, everybody. Great weekend.
Slava Ukraini, Heroim Slava i Pizdet, Rusiski Federacji.